Hello, everybody. Have a good day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our webinar, Why Market and Competitive Intelligence Often Goes Overlooked. My name is Rainer Michaeli. I'm the director of the Institute for Competitive Intelligence. And today it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker of the day to you. This is George Axiotis.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon.
Thank you, George. Oh, thank you. So I know you're now live. We're not in the same room, obviously, for various reasons. But this is good that you can join us today. Why market and competitive intelligence often goes overlooked. Sounds like a very straightforward topic, right? It's a bit like, if you can crack this nut, then of course, competitive and market intelligence has a huge edge. It's really something to leverage on. So I'm looking forward to listening to George and his idea about that. He will introduce himself, give us a bit of background, how come that he knows secret stuff like that. And then, of course, it's all about interaction. Unfortunately, we can't open microphones for these sessions. We are far too many in this very web session, but there is a chat function. So please, everybody who joins, who follows us, feel free to post your questions. We'll wait until George will have finished his slides. That's something like a 20 minutes session. And then obviously we can take it from there and see what kind of questions you come up with. Make a little reference if you want to his slides, or simply ask more general questions in the context of this very topic that George will introduce. Okay, so it's my pleasure, George. Hand it over to you and listen and see what's your mysterious formula for market and competitive intelligence success. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rainer, for that introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody in the audience. It is great being here today and also having the opportunity to speak to everybody. And thank you for joining the webinar today. Just as a quick introduction to myself, my name is George Axiotis, and I am currently the Market Intelligence Manager for one of the newest business divisions, which is a software division of UL. For those that are not familiar with UL is a global organization that's really driven by a mission to improve the world, making it a safer place. And we currently do that by ensuring that the products within the marketplace, that they're safe, that they're sustainable, and that they comply to certain regulatory requirements. And we ensure that through today testing, certification of products, and also most recently extending into software solutions as well. So the topic of my presentation today is why market and competitive intelligence often goes overlooked. And this basically means two things. There's two key points behind this statement. The first is that the majority of our internal colleagues who we publish intelligence information for, I usually refer to these internal colleagues as my customers. The majority of our internal customers who we publish information for, they don't necessarily read this information. Or if it's a presentation, they may not log in to listen to that information as well. Second, the ones that do read our intelligence or do engage with our content in some form or fashion, they do not necessarily use this information to create some type of positive strategic impact for our organizations. They don't necessarily act on that information. For them, this intelligence is something that's just nice to know. It doesn't go further beyond that. And I think that this is a very interesting topic, something that I'm very passionate about because it is, I believe, a common challenge that almost all market intelligence and competitive intelligence professionals will face throughout their careers. And it's an ongoing challenge as well that needs to be addressed. So we'll dive into the problem a little bit further, and I'll also outline a few very simple and practical steps in which we can all take today, essentially, to reverse the course of this situation within our own organizations. So when I first started in the market and competitive intelligence field, I'd say it was a little bit over 5.5 years ago. I was very new to this type of role. One of the first things that I was introduced to was the intelligence cycle. And I'm sure that we are all very well aware of what the intelligence cycle is. However, at the time, I found it very helpful because it provided me a very systematic approach and a step-by-step approach that I could follow for essentially any project that I was working on to help me gather information, turn that information into insights, and ultimately support the strategic decision-making process of my own internal customers. As I began to gain some experience, however, within my role, I quickly noticed a pattern in how I use this intelligence cycle and also in how other market intelligence professionals use the intelligence cycle. And that pattern was that the majority of professionals in our field, they place more effort and more importance on the earlier stages of the intelligence cycle, which include the direction, collection, processing, and analysis steps. And if we think about it, that really makes sense because some of the earlier stages are really some of the hardest to complete. So for example, we spend time with our internal customers to really understand what their requirements for a project are. We then collect data and information from multiple sources. We process that information to find what's relevant, what's up to date, and we analyze that information by placing it in context of our own organization and analyzing the impact that this information can have to our own organization. I've noticed, however, that after that analysis step, many market intelligence professionals do not necessarily place the same amount of effort or thought into the dissemination stage and also into the feedback stage for that matter. And what typically happens is that we'll send out a deliverable either through email or using some other type of technology platform, and then essentially we're done. But I believe that this is a mistake, and the reason is because intelligence dissemination, which is essentially the step where we're sending our customers our final deliverable, I believe it's actually the most important aspect of a market intelligence and competitive intelligence function, and it could essentially make or break your internal market intelligence function. And yet it's really the one step that we spend the least amount of time and effort on. So to really understand why intelligence dissemination is the most important phase of the intelligence cycle, I'd like us to just take a step back and consider a question. And that question is, what happens after we publish intelligence for our internal customers? And this can include, for example, sending out a variety of deliverables, whether it's some type of report or newsletter or email, in a variety of formats or through a variety of channels. As I mentioned, when I first started at UL, again, I was very new to a market intelligence and competitive intelligence role, and therefore I was very inexperienced. Some would say that I was even naive. So in the earlier years, in my mind, I had a certain expectation of what happened after I sent out intelligence and a deliverable to my internal customers. And that expectation essentially looked something like this picture here. The expectation in my mind was that after I sent out this deliverable, here I'm highlighting a monthly newsletter, for example. After I sent out this newsletter, my customers and the internal executives, they would get together, they would discuss the information that I've presented in my deliverable, they would discuss the impact that this information had to our business, and they would essentially take some type of action based on the intelligence that I provided. Let me tell you, I quickly realized that this was a good dream that I was having, and the reality of the situation was that, in fact, the opposite of this, it was actually true. And what really happened after I sent out the deliverable, it looked something like this. The reality was that my deliverable was not being read, it was not being opened, and more importantly, it was not being acted upon. And this was occurring because there is competition for our internal customers' attention. My newsletter, for example, was competing against other deliverables that my customers were receiving. It was competing against this month's financial projections, against our sales pipeline statistics. And it's also competing against the other 100 or 200 or 300 emails that this executive may have received just today alone. So we all know that information overload is an issue in today's world, and it's especially true in today's digital age. And as a result, what occurs is that we are all filtering the information that we receive on a daily basis. And we do that because we're trying to essentially find signal in all of the noise. We're trying to understand what is worth my time to read, what is worth my time to listen to, because let's face it, we're not going to be able to read every piece of information that we receive on a daily basis. So this is really why I believe intelligence dissemination is so important, because going back to the intelligence cycle, even if you understand your customer's requirements, even if you execute perfectly on collecting information, on processing that information, and even if you conduct the best analysis in the world, if you don't get the dissemination step right, and if no one reads your report, and if no one acts upon that information, it was not successful. The end result of sending out a deliverable that nobody reads is the same end result as not producing that deliverable at all. So this is really why I believe intelligence dissemination is so important. The good news, however, is that there are some very simple solutions that we could all put in place to capture our internal customers' attention, and also help make market intelligence and competitive intelligence an integral part of our customers' strategic decision-making process. And you'll notice in the next few slides here, I'll outline 3 major approaches that we can essentially all implement today. You'll notice again that these are very simple solutions. I'm a big believer in keeping things simple, and something that we can all do essentially immediately. So before I kind of dive into my first approach here as a solution, I'd like us to just consider this question. If you're a busy executive and you receive, for example, these 2 emails, which one would you be more likely to open? I would like to think that the email on the right, for example, would be more likely to be opened because the title is more descriptive. It invokes some type of curiosity within the recipient who receives this, and hopefully it will increase the chances that this email will be opened. So I like to refer to our first approach as ways to essentially make your emails and deliverables stand out in order to get them noticed. And to get them noticed from the, again, hundreds of other emails and deliverables that our internal customers and our internal executives may receive on a daily basis. So the first strategy to help us do that is to essentially title our deliverables in a way that capture our customers' attention and captures their curiosity, and to make them want to read more and also learn more. So just, spending a few extra seconds being a little bit more thoughtful in how we title our deliverables and our emails can help make sure that they are actually opened and that they're a click-through to the actual content itself. The second strategy here is to create a specific brand and format for your particular deliverables. For example, going back to my newsletter, I send out a monthly newsletter, which I have branded with a single consistent look and feel, and I've titled it as the Intelligence Edge. And by creating this brand over time, what happens is that I help to strengthen that brand internally, and the identity of that brand. And if the deliverable contains good content, it is essentially going to be the brand that my customers reach to first for any market intelligence or competitive intelligence needs that they have. And over time, you create a reputation for that brand, for that particular deliverable, and customers know what to expect when you send something out. The final strategy here is the way that we package our content can also help to make sure that it gets noticed. So for example, In addition to sending out, let's say, a written report or a newsletter, we can also combine this written deliverable with a video of ourselves explaining some of the key points in that deliverable. Or we can set up a video conferencing call in which we can walk our internal customers through some of the key points. Again, you're just making that information easier to digest. Finally, one of the things that I notice many team members doing is that we typically send out a summary of a competitive news alert. So let's say today a competitor releases a press release, we'll summarize that press release and send it to our internal customers. While that is good and it's important to do that, it doesn't necessarily provide any additional information other than what was already provided in that press release. So one way to have your news alert stand apart from others is to tie into maybe other events that may have occurred with that competitor in the recent past. Just provide a little bit more value-added content for your internal colleagues, as opposed to just a very simple summary, which in many cases they may have already received from 5 other colleagues within our organizations as well. So this is the first strategy here. Again, very simple. Moving on to our second strategy, just another question for us to consider. If we were presented with 2 intelligence deliverables, the one on the left or the one on the right, which deliverable do we think would be most likely to be used in strategic discussions? If I had to answer this question, I would like to believe that the one on the right will be more likely to be used in strategic discussions because the format, again, is a little bit easier to digest, but more importantly, you're connecting that information to your organization and you're outlining what impact it could possibly have to my organization, to you all, for example. So this brings us on to our second approach here, which is to make sure that your analysis feeds your company's strategy. And if you do this, it will ensure that people will consider your information and will essentially act upon your information. The first strategy under this approach, the first strategy here is somewhat of a touchy subject because I have heard differing opinions on this. However, I believe that the key intelligence topics that we monitor on an ongoing basis, these topics should really be aligned with strategic goals, not necessarily tactical goals. So what I mean by this, if we think about, for example, our business leadership and the goals that they have, a large portion of their time is really spent on thinking where they are going to take the business tomorrow, what new markets they will enter tomorrow, and what new client needs they will solve in the marketplace tomorrow. And also how, for example, will they beat the competition? Therefore, providing them with, for example, tactical information, such as how can we improve our website, or how can we improve some of our messaging at our conferences, while those tactical topics are important and they have their own place in the organization as well, these will be less important in feeding the strategic decision-making process. So again, focus more on strategic goals, not tactical goals of your organization. The second strategy here is to make sure that we deliver forward-looking insights. And the reason why that is important is because strategy is always forward-looking. And many times there's a disconnect with strategy and market and competitive intelligence because the majority of market and competitive intelligence is really focused on what happened today or what happened in the past. However, real value comes into providing forward-looking insights. For example, if a competitor, let's say, acquires a company today, one thing we can do is provide an analysis of what the combined company will look like one year from today. What new capabilities will that combined company have 1 year from today? What will their strategy be 1 year from today? Another thing that we can do, many times we use certain canned analytical methods, such as the SWOT analysis, for example. And these are typically completed for a company at a point in time, so usually today. A better way, though, to complete a SWOT analysis is to understand the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a company, let's say 6 months from today or 1 year from today. So it's the same analytical method, but it's just a slightly different perspective. And it'll ensure that you are feeding the strategic decision-making process of your internal executives. And then finally, the last point here, the last strategy for this approach is to really avoid analysis paralysis. And basically what that means is that as market intelligence and competitive intelligence professionals, there are really many analytical techniques that we can use. However, I have found that executives really don't care what analytical methods we use. They're really concerned with two questions, and that is so what and why. So for example, if we send a piece of intelligence to our internal executives, they want to know why this piece of intelligence is important. Why should they spend time reading it? And further, what is the impact that this information will have to my organization? Those are really the two key questions that they care about. And if we can answer that, then we'll make sure that our intelligence is being used on a daily basis. And then the final question here that I would like for us to consider is if we look at the explanation on the left and the explanation on the right, which explanation do we think is more understandable and engaging, which can engage our audience a little bit better? If I had to answer this question, I'd say the one on the right, because for me, I understand complex topics visually, and it provides a little bit more context, I think, versus the explanation on the left. So this ties me into my third and final approach, which is to engage and continue the discussion. And I'm a big believer that market and competitive intelligence should really be a two-way discussion. It shouldn't always be just us passing on information to our customers. We should involve our internal colleagues into the process of providing insights as well. And by doing that, we can make sure that our intelligence is used. So the first strategy here that we can engage is visualize. This is very straightforward. I believe that my internal customers typically understand complex topics visually. It helps to get the message across better. And by including some visual elements to our analysis, there's better chances that our colleagues will digest and understand that information. Second, make sure that you collaborate with your internal customers. Some of the things that I've noticed when we send out an email with a particular deliverable, we'll usually end that email with a general question such as, please let me know if you have any questions. A better way, however, to engage our internal customers is to, for example, directly ask a question to a customer. Say, for example, George, how do you think this information will impact our organization? Try to draw some insights from your audience as well to make sure that you're continuing to discuss this intelligence and again, engaging your audience. And then the final strategy here is relevancy. Without context into knowing what your firm is doing, no amount of competitive intelligence or market intelligence will be worthwhile or useful. And the reason for that is because we need to stay current on where our organization is headed and continually adjust the scope of our research to make sure that we're looking at competitors, at markets that are relevant to our rapidly changing organizations. And keeping up with our organizations and providing insights that are tailored to the context of our own firms will increase the readership of our intelligence and will increase engagement as well. So how does this all fit together? Here's just a very simple example of the newsletter that I send out on a monthly basis. And you can see here the three approaches working in tandem. The first standout to get noticed, you'll notice there's a interesting title here, invokes some curiosity, and there's a branded look and feel to the deliverable. Second, the analysis feeds strategy. I answer the important questions of so what and why is this important to you all? And then third, engagement. There are some visual elements to this newsletter, and you'll notice as well that I call out a particular colleague to answer a question as well. And then I quickly wanted to show the impact, at least that I have had, the positive impact by essentially implementing these three strategies within my own organization. You can see here this black line. Before I implemented these strategies, I had about a 20% open rate of my particular deliverables and intelligence emails. After implementing these strategies, you can see that my open rate has increased to about 40 to 45%. So will these strategies get you to 100% open rate and click rate? Definitely not. Will there be a step in the right direction? Definitely yes, and we can see the results here. And then quickly, I know I'm running a little bit out of time, but I just wanted to mention one other strategy that I'm currently working on internally, and I have named this the Platform-Agnostic Strategy. It's a very confusing title, but basically what that means is internally, we all have different customers. Here's one customer, for example. This is Sales Sam. He typically travels on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis. When I send Sales Sam some type of intelligence, he prefers to get a text message with this information. He didn't have time to check his email on the road. Moving on to a second customer, Marketing Mary. Marketing Mary spends a lot of her time managing our social media accounts and engaging with our customers on social media. The intelligence that I send Marketing Mary, she prefers to have this information within Facebook because she's on Facebook all the time. So essentially, this is the theory and idea behind this platform-agnostic strategy. Essentially, I am pushing the intelligence that I've published to the preferred channels of my customers. And I currently do that through two automation tools, which we can all use. They're free tools, very easy to use. One is called Zapier, one is called If This, Then That. And basically what happens is internally I use Slack, which is basically just a messaging tool, as my central hub of intelligence information. If I post some type of a deliverable or information on Slack, using the integrations that I have connected with Zapier and If This, Then That, that information automatically gets published for my customers in their preferred channels of choice, including email, including they can get a text message, or various private channels that I've set up on certain social media channels, such as Yammer, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Again, these are very easy tools to use. Anyone can kind of log in today. It's a free tool and get up and running and connect your various channels today. So that's it as my presentation. If we can continue the discussion online, please feel free to email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. With that, I will pass it on to Ronner for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, George. Thank you very much. This was very interesting. And obviously, as I mentioned in the beginning of our webinar, it's time for our audience to send in your chat questions. I'll read them out loud for everybody, and then, of course, you should be able to answer it, or at least give it a shot. So please keep them floating in and give us a bit of a issues that we can go along these lines. Okay, here's one. How many readers do you, George, serve out of how many UL employees? So give us an idea about the quantity and quality, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. So because I currently work in one of the newest software divisions of UL, I do have a smaller audience. Initially, when I started, we were around 150 employees. I currently today support over 250 employees. So if we consider about a 40% open rate on 250 employees today.
Okay. Then it's a question for your statistics, your open click statistics. Why don't you measure satisfaction in word brackets of your readers? Because it doesn't mean, obviously, if somebody opens a message, a mail, that she is satisfied with this, let alone that they'll come back next time you send something. So why do you go this way and not really go for content and kind of satisfaction surveys?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think, at least for the purposes of this presentation, I was really just focusing on that dissemination stage of the intelligence cycle. If we think about the phase after dissemination, the feedback step, that's really where you can kind of measure that satisfaction and reach out to your customers, say, was this intelligence helpful to you? What can we do better next time? So I think we can spend another presentation kind of discussing that feedback step as well. But at least for the purposes of this presentation, I was really just focusing on that dissemination step and just seeing initially who opens these emails as well. And really, it's the first step to satisfaction, because if it's not opened, then you can guarantee that your customers will not be satisfied, because then they'll definitely not consume that information.
Yeah, right. Of course, this makes sense. But again, it gives a bit of a perspective. And again, there might be just an issue of how do you get people to comment, how they get some kind of feedback to start with.
Sure.
Here's the next question, sort of going for the same notion. Why bother to shoot for volume of readers? Shouldn't we focus on few but important ones?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends on the certain deliverable that you're sending out. If it's, for example, daily competitive news alert, you would like that to reach the widest audience possible within your business unit. If, for example, you're completing a particular project, let's say for your sales leadership, that comes more into the quality aspect. Just reaching to your sales colleagues and meeting their particular needs for a particular project. So I think it depends on the deliverable. In terms of what I was measuring, that was more the competitive news alerts and the flash alerts, and also the monthly newsletters, which are really meant to target the widest audience possible within my individual business unit.
Yeah, and this is sort of another bit redundant question coming up. Why do you push intelligence rather than waiting for people to really pull it? And then obviously you don't have this issue of who opens, because if it's ordered or even paid for, then of course there might be different communication. And I think you answered that already. So maybe you can comment on, is there a second channel of communication, sort of apart from this news daily push business that you serve?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I do have both push channels and also pull channels. One of the pull channels, for example, that I have, we use an internal competitive intelligence portal in which all our individual business units could essentially set up a dashboard. And on that dashboard, you can pull certain deliverables. You can have certain keywords in the background, bringing up certain search alerts off of Google, for example. And that is one of my pull channels. I have noticed, however, that the majority of my executives don't like having to sign on to another platform and to manually pull information. They don't necessarily have the time to do that. So as a result, the majority of the things that I do and the majority of the deliverables, I do push them out to my colleagues. But that being said, that's just my internal experience. But again, it is important to the point to have both push channels and pull channels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think this is very obvious that you have to cut somehow short on what you're doing, but this is the purpose of our session, sort of providing some impulses here, some inspiration. And yes, you might even provoke that people reconsider what they're doing at this moment of time. So here comes the next question from Udo. Thank you for your insightful presentation. Based on your experience, is it fair to say that normal marketing practices, i.e. the 4 Ps, should be applied to market sell yourself, your work internally?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could notice with those, some of the solutions which I mentioned, such as tidying the deliverable, branding it, kind of engaging your audience. That's, marketing 101, essentially. It's taking a page book from our marketing teams. And it's essentially combining some of these marketing strategies with market intelligence and, meeting the needs of your internal customers. So I believe that's a great point. It's essentially combining marketing and market intelligence.
Okay. Second question from Udo. Do you have metrics you measured against, brackets success, and how do they correlate to your marketing efforts?
Sure. So I'd say some of the metrics that I measured on It's really in line with the executives that I serve. So I'm not sure if there's a direct correlation, but for example, I'm held responsible for revenue growth, as is are the executives that I serve. And it's not a perfect fit, but if, for example, I can help to identify certain strategies that we can use to beat our competition, if I can identify certain companies or startups within the marketplace that we can acquire and to help us build new capabilities that help us add value to our current customers and again beat the competition. That is essentially what will help me be successful in my role. It's a little bit hard to measure, but at least that's how it works currently within my organization.
Fair enough. Next question for you. Any strategy to generate interesting titles for your information distribution? Which channels have most impact to communicate those insights? What about time of the day at the right time, view opportunity?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think answering first the question title, one of the tools that I use to send out emails versus just the company email program is a program called MailChimp. And MailChimp is a free tool to use depending on how many people you send your email to. But it's used by marketing folks. And one of the pretty cool features within MailChimp is you can input a title of the deliverable, and it'll basically give you a ranking about how engaging that title will be. So typically what I'll do, I'll try a few examples, and based on the ratings that MailChimp provides, I'll typically choose with the more engaging title. Another thing that I'll do sometimes, I'll consider A/B testing. So I'll send a deliverable with one title and the same deliverable with another title, and I'll see which one worked, which one didn't work, and I'll take that feedback for next time as well. Can you repeat some of the other aspects of the question, Ron, or I forgot the later question?
Well, the question about the timing. So
Yes.
So what about the time of the day at the right time, view opportunity? Any strategy or advice for that?
Sure, that's a good question as well. I think it depends on the technology platform that you use. One of the things, for example, if we think about LinkedIn, one of the things that I've noticed about LinkedIn, you typically get the best engagement of articles or posts on LinkedIn typically before lunch and after lunch. And why that happens is before lunch, people are kind of thinking about going to lunch. They may stop working. They may check their LinkedIn page. When they return from lunch, we just may have ate a heavy meal. We may not immediately want to go back to work. Let me check my LinkedIn page for 5 minutes and then I'll get back to work. So I've noticed that period before lunch and after lunch is typically successful on LinkedIn, but that might be different depending on the social media platforms or the technology platforms that you use.
Thank you. And obviously, MailChimp, the software you're using, helps you to get some stats out on that?
Correct. Yeah, they have this page. For example, it was the statistics page, which I had in the previous slide here. It shows you open rates, click rates, and the customers which most engage with your content.
Okay, so that's definitely something to consider if you're into this kind of communication. The next one and the final one so far. So please, if you have any additional questions, type in and send them to me. In HR, what is AR? What is your experience and give your interpretation on IG competitor steps? Does management or colleagues like that, or do they think that's their job?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would say, at least within my experience has been that market and competitive intelligence is not something that I solely focus on. I have noticed many colleagues, regardless if it's their responsibility or not, send out market and competitive intelligence information. So, for example, let's say today one of my competitors acquires a company. My executive may have already gotten that information from 5 other colleagues before I even sent it to them. So one of the strategies then for myself internally is to not play in with the pack. And that ties back to my earlier point. Let me not send the same just summary that 10 other people sent. Even if I send this information later on in the day to my executive, let me add some more value added content to that summary, something that other colleagues may not spend time and effort on compiling. So for example, what patterns can I find with this press release? How does this tie into other events that have occurred within this competitor in the past 3 months or 6 months? And then also, more importantly, providing some forward-looking insights and tying this information to what impact I think it will have on our organization. These things are typically something that other colleagues will do. My other colleagues will just send out the link to the article and they're done. So that's our job to add some more value-added content to our executives.
Okay. Here's a bit of an add-on remark question to that. How do you manage corporate memory? I.e., do you archive your insight? Could somebody dig deeper when they have some additional questions, or again, they want to comment on what you sent? Or is it really just day-to-day news flows?
So it's more than just day-to-day news flows. One of the ways that I archive currently are deliverables and reports, and some of the insights that I also get from my team members is again through that central competitive intelligence portal that we have. Again, it's basically just a dashboard where I can store all the deliverables that I produce on that dashboard. So my team at least knows that there's a central place for this information. And if they have a question or they need to look up some information, they can access this central source of information and again pull these reports.
Okay, and now add on from my end, is there anything like a community building around that, or is it just day by day check in?
So one of the community aspects with that dashboard is basically an opportunity for colleagues to provide insights as well. And you can check this community of insights. Let's say, for example, a salesperson is speaking to a customer and they received some type of interesting tidbit about a competitor. They can post that tidbit on this central community. And all this feedback and insights from my customer network, again, is on that central channel. It's tough because I know many of our organizations may not have a central competitive intelligence portal. If we don't, for example, there's many other free tools that we can leverage to do that, such as Slack, for example. Slack is a free, essentially messaging tool, and you can essentially set up a page where your internal network can post some competitive intelligence insights as well on that community, and you can kind of discuss with your community on Slack as well.
Okay, that sounds, of course, far more complicated or powerful even. But again, now it makes a bit more sense for me to understand what kind of channels you already described, but there's more obviously to serve the whole of your company.
Yes.
Yeah, here's the next one, a bit different from what we discussed so far. Hi, first, thanks for the opportunity and your sharing. I'm from Turkey, and here people are scared the concept of intelligence because of its connotations. What will be your suggestions to touch to people and overcome this obstacle?
I think it's showing the value that this intelligence can have. If we can show, for example, that by not being in tune to the market, not being in tune to the changing competitive landscape, which let's face it, in today's world, it's changing much more rapidly than before. Competitors, for example, are acquiring companies on a daily basis. They're expanding into new geographic regions on a daily basis. They're essentially changing business models overnight. And if we don't keep on top of these changing trends, our business can be disrupted almost overnight. I think there's plenty of examples out there of companies that weren't in tune with the marketplace weren't in tune with a competitive landscape and also weren't in tune with their customer needs. And it's dangerous to not do that. So I think, again, it's just showing the value that this information can have, even if they're reluctant initially. If we can analyze the impact that this information has to our organization and make some type of recommendations based on this intelligence, I think over time the executives will begin to kind of turn around and to begin to use this information more and more.
And if I might add, I mean, I'm not into any specific Turkey history, culture, or connotations here, but maybe you simply avoid this term intelligence that is indeed pretty much tainted by some kind of central intelligence, military intelligence, or whatever. So maybe you go for customer insight, maybe you call it, depending now on your industry, more B2B market research, blah, blah. So there's no need, I guess, to go for this very specific term. And then again, what George just said, press on the button and say, okay, this is what we need, carrot and stick. If you don't have it, you have a problem. If you have it, you might be better by whatever you're doing. Do you ever consider changing this term, or did you ever experience some kind of negative reaction to that?
At least I haven't internally. I have noticed, however, to the prior question that was raised, if I'm speaking to, for example, individuals that don't necessarily know what market intelligence or competitive intelligence is, again, they'll hear the word intelligence and they may think something like, military or FBI type things. So sometimes I may just stick with the word insights to your prior point, Rainer. I think it kind of shows what information we're providing and kind of what it can be used for. So I think that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's pretty much all from our chat pipeline. So if you could switch to the last slide, George.
Yeah.
And it's up to me, of course, to thank you for this very interesting, well-animated presentation. I think the lesson you just taught us is very well inherent in your own slides, so thank you very much. And the final word, of course, about the Institute for Competitive Intelligence. We have a lot of these webinars, and if you want to check out what's in our library, in our archive, check out our Insight Center on our website. And yes, no surprise, I guess, we do run workshops. The next one coming up, as you see in this very slides, in Amsterdam, Paris, for the first half, and then our big conference in May, this time in Luxembourg. And this is, by the way, how I met George. He was on our one of our speakers in one of our past conferences. So you meet interesting people to start with at our conferences. Yeah, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I'm sure if there are additional questions you can answer. And again, anybody interested in some second listening or some add-on to that, just follow us and contact George if you want to. So thank you very much and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.